Hello team, welcome to another ATP Geopolitics video with myself, Jonathan MS Pearce. I am super excited to be joined today by Jake Broe from his own YouTube channel. Everyone knows who Jake Broe is, of course. He is at the heart of, in being a YouTube influencer in the kind of information landscape that we all exist in when we're learning about what's going on in Ukraine. He's been an absolute legend in terms of fundraising for NATO. In fact, so much so that I have decided to drink tea from my NATO mug today, just in honor of Jake's incredible fundraising. And I'm just super excited to have him on again for the third time. Jake, thank you so much for popping over for a chat.
Thanks for having me back on, Jonathan. I always appreciate talking to you.
Yeah, always a pleasure, never a chore. I hope that's the same for you. So so much to talk about today. And I guess, as someone's already said in the live chat, any thoughts about Trump and his illnesses? We'll get onto that, I think, because a lot of people are talking about that in the information space. And of course, Donald Trump and the American administration have an incredible impact on the war in Ukraine. But I wanted to first go to the story, the news of the murder of the former Speaker of Ukraine's parliament. And this took place in Lviv today. A delivery driver, someone disguised as a delivery driver, walked up, sadly, to the politician. It happens behind a tree, luckily here, but he was then shot a number of times and has been killed. So this is a politician being assassinated. People like Serhiy Stenenko have come out today as someone, involved in these kind of information spaces and given a warning to journalists and maybe influencers as well. So what are your thoughts on this before we talk about, are you particularly worried, for example?
Well, my condolences to the nation of Ukraine for losing, I think, an important politician, the former Speaker of the Rada. But yes, all of Ukraine is a war zone, and the Russians are using any means they can to eliminate any person they think benefits their efforts. So I don't know exactly the motivation or who this individual was. I'm sure they'll be apprehended. But yes, if you are a person of significance to the war effort in any way, you are a potential target, not just in Ukraine, but anywhere in the world. There's been assassinations, I think, in Spain. That Russian helicopter pilot who stole a helicopter got the reward and then thought he was sitting comfortable. The FSB found him and killed him. So yes, with the assassination attempts on Sternenko, this is something I have to be mindful of. I know that potentially for the rest of my life, I'm on the Russians' bad list. I've made maybe 700 videos in the last 3.5 years making fun of Putin. I've got a cartoon bubble with Putin saying something stupid on the thumbnail of every one of my videos. I'm sure somebody at the FSB is assigned to watching my content and taking notes. So yeah, I am careful of that, mindful of that. And it's a motivator for me to make sure that Russia does not win this war, because anybody who has been putting in time and effort to make sure that Russia doesn't win this war, our safety and security for the rest of our lives are at a risk. Nothing compared to the average Ukrainian or Ukrainian politician, given the horror of what we saw with this being caught on camera. But yes, this is something that everyone has to take into consideration. And to be honest, Jonathan, I don't think this is going to deter anyone. It's not going to deter me. I don't think it's going to deter you. I don't think it's going to deter many people. So the Russians, if they do more of these targeted assassinations, it's not going to help them win.
Yeah, and it's interesting. Greg Terry, I've just put up a comment from him here. He's just done a video from in Ukraine saying, look, this is a warning. Use your noodle. Be clever with what you do. Don't think about operational security, but also this should act as you say, an inspiration to actually know who the good guys are, the bad guys are, and work even harder to make sure that Ukraine prevails. So that is but this is war, and actually that happens. Both sides have gone down the assassination route. We have seen assassinations take place and attempted assassinations take place within Moscow. We've seen car bombs go off here and there, Melitopol in the last week, I think, and a number of other places. What are your views on sort of targeted assassination and warfare?
A lot of these assassinations happening inside Russia, those are the Russians doing it to themselves. Political infighting and mafia-style deals. There's this Wikipedia page of mysterious deaths of Russian businessmen since the full-scale invasion started. And it's not just in Russia. These are wealthy, well-connected Russian businessmen dying in Spain, dying in Italy, being, poisoned or mysterious heart attacks, or being thrown out windows, or being found dead on their yachts. This is just how the Russians operate. They don't have any morals, and they don't believe in following any rules or laws. And this is a scourge. This is a menace to every democratic society as they continue to infiltrate us and do target assassinations. So, has Ukraine been assassinating people inside Russia? And I don't know if I've seen direct proof of that. I think they should. For severe war criminals or people conducting these bombings of Ukrainian cities, if Ukraine wants to, I guess they do targeted assassinations with like HIMARS and ATACMS, but those are command posts. Those are either FSB officers or uniformed soldiers carrying out these civilian attacks, and those are valid military targets. But a former Speaker of the Parliament, I don't know if Ukraine would ever do the equivalent of that, trying to target somebody in Moscow.
Well, the claim was that they targeted Alexander Dugin, the philosopher behind.
I've never seen any evidence linking Ukraine to that, and that doesn't make any sense. Like, why would Ukraine go after a political philosopher one time 3 years ago and never try again? In addition, when that story broke, I remember making the videos, and there was a lot of weird stuff with like the CCTV video being shut off that watched the parking lots when the bomb was planted. Ukraine can't do that. Ukraine can't just make security cam video disappear. So that was a very weird incident in which that might have been, once again, internal political fighting amongst Russian elites. So I've never seen any evidence linking Ukraine to the killing of Alexander Dugin's daughter. But I do want to remind everyone, she was a propagandist herself on a book tour advocating for Ukraine's genocide. So she was not innocent just because she was young and a woman. She was walking in her father's footsteps.
Yeah, I don't necessarily disagree with any of those claims. The other one was I think was he a Telegram maybe veteran guy in St. Petersburg who received a present, like a doll, sort of not a doll, a kind of figurine.
That was a Wagner military blogger. He was very well known, but once again, he was really well connected with Prigozhin and Dmitry Ukhin, and this was after Prigozhin and Dmitry Ukhin were killed. So once again, was this Ukraine targeting a military blogger that had fallen out of favor with the Russian military? Or was this the FSB and the Kremlin tying up loose ends, not wanting, I don't know, maybe this guy had hard drives. Maybe he had digital files of Prigozhin's last recordings about what really happened, which I'm still hoping for someday. I'm still hoping from beyond the grave we'll get some videos released of Prigozhin admitting things or talking about things, because that guy, he just shot his shot too soon. He did his coup attempt in 2023, and if he had just held out and waited another year or two, he probably would have been successful.
Yeah, because there are these rumors that have been bubbling over recently that actually Putin, there is, it's ripe for a coup at the moment. That there are people within the whether it's Moscow, St. Petersburg, wherever, maybe elites, I don't know, Siloviki, whoever it is, there are rumors that Putin may be vulnerable at the moment. What do you say to that? Do you think there's anything in that?
I didn't really understand the Russian economy and how it functioned going back 3.5 years. 3.5 years ago, I had the straightforward logic of, we need to cause an economic collapse of Russia. And if they just are spending way more than they're taking in tax revenue, and they can't go to the international bond markets to raise more money, then they're screwed. This should be over quick. I didn't realize that Putin could leverage the private wealth of his oligarchs. So billionaires don't have money vaults full of billions of dollars. They have assets. So the CEOs and the owners of all of these companies have been put there by Putin over the last 26 years. So these billionaires on paper, they have equity in the gas giants, in the banks, in the defense companies, in the airlines, in the shipping companies, everything. All of the strategic industries of Russia are controlled by people who owe everything to Putin. So what they've been doing the last 3.5 years is they've been deliberately operating at a loss. They don't make a profit. And Putin has been telling them, you have to do this, whereas a CEO has a fiduciary responsibility to his shareholders to operate at a profit. You either have to fire employees, reduce wages, raise prices, do whatever you can to make sure the balance sheet is green. And for 3.5 years, everyone's been operating at a loss, borrowing more money from Russian commercial banks or the Russian central bank. It's an internal system of just money being moved around. But the risk is if these companies go bankrupt, if they in fact do get wiped out, then billions of these oligarchs' money vanish. It's no longer, if the company becomes worthless, these oligarchs are not worth $6, $7, $10 billion. So they have the most to lose. Now, yes, they owe everything to Putin. Putin put them there. But if something bad were to happen to Putin and the war were to stop, and they could salvage their companies and the equity they hold, that would be in their personal financial interest. So everyone in Russia, they don't want to make the first move because they know the FSB is watching everything they do. But if something bad were to happen to Putin, I think they would love to cut a deal with the West, make this war end, and then try and right the ship. Russia is big enough. They have plenty of territory, plenty of resources. Everyone was getting rich. Putin was insane for going for more. He was just being too greedy. And I think there's a lot of these oligarchs that know this and they want to settle. They want to get out of this.
Yeah, because let's face it, many people claim that Vladimir Putin is the single richest person in the world. That actually, when he was privatizing the state assets, that he would be not just taking a couple of percent, skimming off the top, but actually some have argued that he's taking 50%, of the profits coming out of X, Y, and Z. Now, I don't know what the truth is, but he appears to be exceptionally rich because he has family members who suddenly pop up as billionaires when they didn't used to be billionaires, and there's no route for them becoming billionaires. So you're like, okay, that's interesting. Then he has all these palaces, and then he's got these super yachts around the world that people don't know who owns these super yachts until they do some IDing of some of the people on board, and it turns out they're all FSB agents. So you're like, okay, this is owned by Putin, and he's got however many, like a dozen super yachts. So he's arguably the richest person in the world, and that is kleptocracy, where that money is coming. Well, it's actually come from the public as a whole, but arguably from these oligarchs that you're talking about. So they probably got a pretty good rationale to get rid of, to not want Putin around, because you could still have a kleptocracy, but without Putin being the one that is creaming too much from them. I don't know if that makes sense.
All of these guys know that if you say the wrong thing or do the wrong thing, you're dead. You're going to be poisoned. You're going to be arrested. You're going to be thrown out a window. So they're just all hoping something happens, but they're not going to be the ones to take a shot. These men are all cowards. Once again, Putin put them there. Concerning Putin being the richest man in the world, it's an inconsequential debate because the treasury of Russia belongs to Putin. This is one of the big miscommunications between Trump and Putin, where Trump got into office and he's like, Putin and I, we can make money. If we start working together, we can cut some deals, corruption, graft, whatever. But, I can get richer and you can get richer. We should be working together. End the wars. Let's start doing aluminum deals and Arctic trading routes and, get ExxonMobil back in Russia and all this stuff. And Putin doesn't care because the treasury of Russia is his personal bank account. He can do whatever he wants with it. So he has transcended money. Very few human beings in the history of the world have transcended money. Putin is one of them. And when a man has that much power and is no longer motivated by diamonds and gold and women and all this stuff, then they start talking about legacy. They start talking about conquering the world and then wanting songs sung about them for a century and statues being put up all across their empire. That's where Putin is at right now. And he
Right.
is delusional, and he's never going to stop because there's nothing else for him on this earthly world.
This is a subject that fascinates me because I've talked a lot before about billionaires and how they're kind of, broadly speaking, two types of billionaires. So the billionaire like Bill Gates, George Soros, and I don't really care for people, evaluating them in terms of their politics or whatever, but just in terms of Maslow's hierarchy of needs, getting up towards the top where you get self-actualization, you've achieved everything else. So for many billionaires, it is a case where they're like, oh, I've got to this point where I need for nothing else. And so therefore it's a case of, well, how can I make the world a better place? And they might have different views on this, but Bill Gates will start up the Bill Gates Foundation or whatever and put money back in this way, and Soros does it in his way and whatever. Then you get people like Elon Musk and Jeff Bezos that are still in the accumulation of wealth and power stage, and you're kind of wondering where they're going with that. It's about racing to space maybe, and then Elon Musk has maybe more ideological things going on. But for someone like Vladimir Putin, and as you say, if you've transcended money, you've accumulated as much sort of power and wealth as you can conceivably think about, although you might think that you can expand your empire. Well, maybe that's it. So for me, I've always thought that it's about legacy for him, and this is about returning the USSR or the Russian Federation to its former glory, expanding the territory to get these places back in, so that he becomes Peter the Great, the Second, or whatever. Do you think that it's about legacy for him and that kind of understanding of expansionism?
Absolutely. I mean, he communicates it to us all the time when he's talking about Russian princes and Russian rulers from 1,000 years ago. He is viewing himself as a continuation of that story, of that legacy, and he wants to add to it. He wants, an important chapter in Russian history, the undoing of America's victory in the Cold War. This is a term that we don't use, and obviously anybody in the Western Alliance contributed to the collapse of the Soviet Union, the defeat of communism. Putin doesn't want to bring communism back. Putin probably believes that communism was a trick. I've heard this narrative that because Karl Marx was German, it was a German conspiracy to impose communism on the Russian people to hinder their development and growth and weaken them to the detriment of the Russian people. Okay, whatever, fine. Communism was popular in many parts of the world and viewed as a valid economic and political theory. There was a huge communist movement here in the United States in the 1920s and 30s that never achieved critical mass, but it did in Russia. And communism failed. But Putin wants to undo the dissolution of the Soviet Empire. He wants all of these former republics to be directly under Moscow's control, the borders change, or indirectly. And Putin was fine with this arrangement. When Viktor Yanukovych was the president of Ukraine, as long as he deferred to the Kremlin, and the Kremlin had their veto power over any political decision that Ukraine made, good enough. Ukraine was a corrupt, backwards developed country, subordinate to the Russian system. And as long as it remained there, then there wasn't a need for a war or redrawing the maps. This is the goal that Putin has with all the former Soviet republics and really any territory that used to belong to the Russian Empire. This is a empire building project that is going to span decades. Even if Putin dies, if they're successful in Ukraine, they will continue this trajectory. Whoever replaces Putin will then start doing hybrid warfare in Finland or in Poland or Kazakhstan, and then they'll go on to the next war until they continue the project and get back the natural borders of the Soviet Empire. Peter Zeihan is famous for talking about these geographical barriers to give the Russian core territories security. I don't think security in the modern age means anything when you have nuclear weapons. Nobody is going to invade Russia. Nobody wants to attack or invade Russia. It's not very good geography, and I don't know what country would be dumb enough to attack a country with 6,000 nuclear warheads. So the entire we need these borders for security. I don't buy that, but it is somehow pleasing to a ruler to know that they have oceans and mountains and deserts protecting their core territories. So these are the geographical borders that Russia wants because they think it best suits them. But they're going to have to steamroll and conquer 140 million people and dissolve 14 sovereign nations to achieve those goals.
Yeah, so I'm wondering whether you think, well, we got two sets of people. We sort of discussed oligarchs, and in fact, Goose Springsteen has just asked or stated this, and thanks for the super chat. Mark Galliotti has a theory that the next generation of oligarchs in Russia, those in their 50s now, favor a rules-based society as they want to enjoy their money without looking over their shoulders. That's kind of what we were just talking about previously. So they might want someone to replace Putin, who might be a more rules-based sort of person. What do you think the American administration wants? Because there were ideas certainly in Biden's time that they're afraid of, and this still could be the case, although trying to second guess what the hell the Trump administration thinks in terms of international geopolitics is pretty difficult. But there's this idea that Putin, better the devil you could get a dissolution of the Russian Federation if you got someone else in, and then you've got problems with nuclear warheads being here and there and whatever. And so there's this idea that actually we don't want to see Russia lose this war too badly because it might go south. What do you think the Americans, do you think that is a kind of fair assessment of where the US was and where do you think they are now?
Okay, there's a couple different directions I can go there based on your setup and the question. But real quick, that was the Biden administration's policy. Under Joe Biden, the policy was we don't want Russia to collapse. We don't want the fear of loose nukes. That is a dystopian future in which hundreds of millions could die if regional Russian warlords are all fighting over gold deposits and diamond mines and gas fields. So that was Biden. Under Trump, he doesn't think that deep. He doesn't think that far. Nobody in the Trump administration does any critical analysis or policy thinking about anything related to nuclear weapons or whatever. Trump just doesn't have the brain capacity to think that deep. But I want to go back to your setup in which you were talking about, do these Russian oligarchs want an international rules-based order so they can enjoy their wealth? And yes, this is what Russia's oligarchs, even Putin's preferred oligarchs, have been doing for 2 decades, trying to get as much of their wealth and assets out of the country because you have legal protections in Canada, you have legal protections in the UK, you have legal protections in the EU, whereas in Russia, you don't. In China, you don't. In Saudi Arabia, you don't. So why are all of these oligarchs sending their children abroad to Paris or to Berlin or to London or even the United States? And it's because they're trying to protect them. They know that the system that they gained all their wealth from is entirely corrupt, and they can be disappeared and replaced at any moment by Putin. So yeah, they want to get their children and as much of their wealth out as they can. So even if something bad happens to them, their descendants can carry on. They'll still have some kind of legacy to be proud of. But yes, all of these oligarchs, they don't want to diversify their portfolio into China or into Iran or into Belarus. They don't want to go to other dictatorships because there's no security there. And if Russia could reform, democratize, normalize, and then they could have real protections, they would favor that. But nobody's going to take a shot at Putin because he has absolute control.
Yeah. And going back to the economy, and which is connected obviously to what we're talking about, I've been reporting, as I'm sure you have, of the very many canaries in the coal mine with regard to indicators in the Russian economy that are pointing to an actual, finally, because we've been talking about this for years, and the Russian economy has been able to maintain itself due to artificial activity from the state, but also due to putting it on a war economy and having the sovereign wealth fund that they can draw from. But now, you're seeing problems in the agricultural sector, certainly in the hydrocarbon sector, right? But in the trains, in the railway sector, in manufacturing, all over the shop, there are issues going down to 4-day working weeks, making losses. You've got military industrial complex concerns, making losses in a wartime. Just like this should be absolutely ridiculous, but it's happening. So what are your thoughts on the Russian economy and whether that could and will crumble?
Long term, Russia's economy is screwed, and it's always been screwed. And I think the Russians knew that, which is why they wanted to partially absorb Ukraine, take their people, take their natural resources, take their geography to their economic benefit. The Russian core territory is not great land. They don't have navigable rivers. All of the rivers flow north into the Arctic Circle. It's kind of arid, poor quality agriculture. Everything is far away and distant. They have to move stuff by rails just to get it around. So concerning their economic problems, they've done pretty well the last 3.5 years because they've been drawing down the wealth fund of Russia. They had their gold reserves, and they're trying to dig out and ship on plane as much gold as they can to anybody willing to sell stuff to them. But that's a sugar rush. That's a temporary thing. Putin saved up $600 billion for the wealth fund of Russia so that the pension fund would remain solvent for the rest of his life. He wanted enough cushion for the next 20 years, the rest of his lifetime, so that he could survive Western sanctions. The $600 billion was not to fight a war. He didn't save up $600 billion to take 1 million casualties and lose 10,000 tanks and 20,000 APCs and oil refineries getting hit every day. This was not the plan. Kyiv was supposed to fall in 3 days. Sure. The West was going to be mad and they were going to place sanctions on Russia. But Putin has been using the wealth fund to fight the war. And this contributes absolutely nothing to the economy. When you pay to have a tank built and then that tank is immediately destroyed on the Pokrovsk front, you contributed nothing to your economy. When you build a bridge or you build a school or you build an airport, there's an economic value to continue your economy growing over time. But all of this money being spent on defense and war doesn't help Russia in the long run. While they're cutting social services across the board, there was like a 20% reduction in education expenditures, but it's everything. They're cutting corners, they're reducing services, they're not filling potholes, they're letting water main systems completely degrade and collapse. It's bad, but we needed it to accelerate. Ukraine, it has the right strategy going after these oil refineries. This is causing a lot of difficulties. It's going to make inflation worse. Everyone in Russia is being disrupted by this. This is the winning strategy. Keep going, and we're going to see some impressive results, I think, the next 6 months.
Yeah, because I've long thought that Ukraine are not going to militarily prevail until there's an economic collapse, because I think one is contingent on the other. People may disagree, you may disagree, but I think, especially where they're at now with regard to the kind of resources they have, personnel, equipment, and so on and so forth, I think Russia really needs to have an economic collapse. I guess the question is whether the Russian people will ever revolt, whether things can get bad enough for them to actually care enough to revolt against they seem to have this threshold that is unbelievably high for pain and suffering, the Russians. What's your thought about the chances of Russians ever going out and protesting their government?
It's hard for that to happen. The security services need to stop being paid. Or if they are paid, it's not enough to buy groceries for their families. Russians will riot. Russians will burn stuff down. If, the National Guard, Rosgadia, whatever, if they stop doing their jobs. That's how there was a revolution in the Arab Spring in Egypt. The police refused to do their jobs. And I think Putin has always been afraid of this. He's always been concerned about this. He knows, seeing other dictators, especially in the Arab Spring collapse, the palace gets stormed when the police stop shooting people and arresting them. So to get to that point, the cops have to stop being paid, or what they are paid doesn't buy groceries for their family. Will we get there? We're not there yet, but we'll get there eventually. But Russians do vote. Russians do protest their regime by just leaving the country. Every Russian who has fled Russia and not gone back, that's a vote to not participate in the system, to not work a job, pay taxes, contribute to the Russian economy. And Russia has a demographic crisis. They were in serious demographic problems prior to the full-scale invasion, and now with hundreds of thousands of their young people being killed and probably more than 1 million having fled the country and they don't intend on returning, Russia has no future unless they can somehow win this war and stabilize. But it's not going to happen.
Just on that topic, interesting you brought that up about the police and their families. Once if they're not paid, or the security services and families, there's something called the 3.5% rule, and it's this idea that sociologists have looked over history and looked over populations, and they found that every time discontent has got to over 3.5% of the population, to where 3.5% of the population are going to go out and start getting angry, then there's no turning back from that, because that's a critical mass of people, whereby you have people in your own administration and their families suffering in exactly the way you say. So really interesting to see if that will ever be applied to Russia. I mean, hopefully they will get to a point where
I think the 3.5% rule failed in Georgia, because they definitely had more people on the streets than 3.5% of their population. This was last year during their elections. Same is true in Belarus. But once again, I think, the security services were still getting their paychecks and they were still doing their jobs. And these authoritarian
But the thing about
governments,
Georgia is they ended up getting security services in from Russia, so they got all these Tatushkis, and so to bolster the fact that there were those Georgians who were, because you had a few police Georgians switching sides, there's
none of these countries, none of these people will be free until Russia collapses. The people in Moldova and Transnistria, the people in Belarus, the people in Georgia, they're all trapped. Now, Russia's sphere of influence is shrinking. They lost Syria. I think everyone in Iran feels pretty betrayed that Russia did nothing to help them when the United States started bombing them. And we're now getting reports that Wagner has been kicked out of Africa.
Mali,
that their presence and their effectiveness on the African continent continues to degrade because they don't have the resources. They don't have the manpower or the weapons to assert themselves like they were doing just 5 years ago. So
certainly in Mali,
Russia's reach is collapsing around the globe. And I don't want to speculate too much here, but I don't know what's going on in Venezuela. Maduro is naturally the ally of the authoritarian regimes around the world. And I think Trump is a little bit emboldened in that he was able to do whatever he wanted, bombing Iran, and Congress did nothing. Congress wanted no input say. Congress didn't want to be briefed. They didn't want to vote on anything. So that's never happened before, where the president just takes military action against a sovereign nation and Congress isn't even briefed. But we've gotten to this absurd level where the GOP base and the Republican Party want no say. They want no input. They are willing to surrender everything to have Trump be this all-powerful sovereign. What their objective is, I don't understand entirely. I don't think he's accomplishing that much for anyone. But if Trump feels emboldened by getting away with these B-2 strikes on Iran, maybe he is looking for regime change in Venezuela. He thinks that if he can take out Maduro and get somebody in there, because I think there was an election, and I don't know the person who should have won. I don't know where that person is right now. He might be in exile here in the United States, and the goal is to put him in power. And then Trump maybe will think that Venezuela will be a willing recipient of all of these migrants and refugees who have come to the United States. I think close to 1 million of these refugees that have come to the United States came from Venezuela due to the authoritarian regime and instability down there. So maybe Trump thinks we have to attack Venezuela, forcefully remove Maduro, and then we can return these hundreds of thousands of Venezuelan refugees and immigrants who came here as a result over the last 20 years.
Interesting, because trying to work out exactly what he's doing with Venezuela. It's fascinating when he was campaigning on being the peacemaker president, and he subsequently,
that was nonsense.
Yeah, of course. He bombed Iran. He doesn't care for Gaza. Doesn't really give a crap about Ukraine. He doesn't care for peace, and never really did.
Trump wants to attack Greenland, Canada, and the Panama.
Yeah. But it also worth noting that Azerbaijan and Armenia have left also the Russian sphere of influence in quite a significant way. That's fascinating, although Trump's taken the plaudits for that peace settlement, even though he had nothing to do with it, really. That was Turkey and themselves, really. But that's a really good indicator of Russia maybe facing some troubles on the international stage. Now, going back to Trump, and I know you and I could probably talk about Trump until the cows come home, but I'm really frustrated with Trump, obviously, for many, many reasons. But if I was Trump's strategist, if I was someone like Susie Wiles, I'd be really pissed off. And because if Trump had decided on January the 21st to fully back Ukraine and go to town on sanctioning the crap out of Russia, and you see where their economy is now, imagine where it would be if the US got behind full sanctions and was doing like the 19th package of sanctions like the EU, right? Russia would be in trouble, and he would have everyone but Tucker Carlson and Marjorie Taylor Greene. He would take the most of the MAGA base with him because they'll go with him whatever. So the whole peacemaker thing, they jumped on that because it's politically expedient to do so. But actually, they don't really care about peace. If the USA shows that they're winning in Iran, they'll be USA, right? So if he showed strength with Ukraine, he would arguably not have lost so many Reagan Republicans. He would have still had the MAGA Republicans. He would have your hawkish people who understand global geopolitics. And he would be in a lot better position now with regard to international opinion of him from European allies and whatnot. But he's actually made the wrong decision. I'm not talking about like anything particularly ideological, but just a kind of political strategic point of view. Trump just made the wrong choice, and if I was Susie Wiles, I'd be really annoyed with him. Any thoughts on that?
The Russians and MAGA are ideological kin. They view the world as the same. Russia wants to project strength and invade and take the resources of their weaker neighbors. Donald Trump and MAGA are the exact same thing. You know, this was like the first thing, like when Trump took office on January 20th, this was the first week of the new administration. We're going to take Greenland. Donald Trump Jr. went to Greenland and tried to convince some homeless people to wear MAGA hats to show, like, this is a report, I haven't really looked too deep into it, that MAGA agents have been in Greenland trying to promote a independence movement. And it's because they want their natural resources. This is Peter Thiel and Elon Musk wanting the natural resources of Greenland as the ice sheet continues to melt. So they think in dollar signs, they think in resources, they think in terms of empire. This whole, we're going to economically subordinate Canada and make it the 51st state. These people are idiots. They're evil, but they're incredibly dumb. Like, there's so many logistics reasons why absorbing Canada and having them be the 51st state is insane. But we don't even need to talk about that because it's never going to happen. But Trump cannot betray Russia because Russia is the outline. It is the template that MAGA wants to walk to turn the United States into Russia. Now, Russia is objectively a horrible place. The HIV rates, the alcoholism, domestic abuse, violent crime, people being thrown out windows. Nobody wants to live in Russia. Russians who can get out of Russia get out. But the propaganda projects it as this Christian utopia of conservative values. And we occasionally get delusional Americans from Texas moving to Russia because they believe that this is the template. This is the right-wing paradise that they will enjoy with no trans people and immigrants know their place and blah, blah, blah. So Trump idolizes Putin. Trump looks up to this man. He says, this is a man who for 26 years has stayed in power through brute force and oppression, and everyone kisses his ass, and everyone does what he says, and he has so much power, and he's so cool. Putin is his role model. He loves this man.
Mm-hmm.
And MAGA is just what they're currently trying to do. They're just looking at what Putin did the first 4 years Putin was in office. The idea that the United States government is taking corporate ownership of publicly traded companies, like Trump this week is bragging how the United States has a 10% ownership of Intel right now. 2 weeks ago, he was saying the CEO of Intel was a Chinese spy who had to be removed. The CEO of Intel, a publicly traded company, needs to be replaced because he's a Chinese spy. Intel then gives Trump 10%, and all of a sudden it's okay that this Chinese spy remains the CEO of Intel. It's so stupid and transparent what they are doing. But Putin, in his first term, replaced the oligarchs with people loyal to him. And now Trump is talking about taking ownership in Lockheed Martin and Raytheon and all these other defense companies.
Yeah,
what
Kevin
MAGA
Hatter,
wants to
one
do,
of his economic advisors, has been saying on the news very openly, yeah, we're looking at doing this in a number of different places. It's like, hang on, a couple of years ago, the GOP would have thought this would be anathema.
Well, this is socialism, and this will make all of, if the government is taking ownership of publicly traded companies, those publicly traded companies will become less efficient, more corrupt, less productive. This is bad for the American economy. This goes in the face of all free market, enterprise, economics, whatever. But this is what you have to do. This is KGB capitalism. This is the template that Putin invented. Once again, having people he controls or people loyal to him taking control of all of these industries and companies. Sure, on paper, the equity is theirs, the billions are theirs, but it's really Putin who controls it. This is what Donald Trump and MAGA are trying to do today. They're idiots. They're screwing it up. It's not going to succeed. But yeah, your question is why doesn't MAGA flip on the Russians and become the hero of the West, hero of the NATO alliance and democracies? And it's because they don't care. They think democracies are suckers. People who follow the rules are suckers. People who engage in free enterprise and are not corrupt are suckers. Those people are losers that we're not gonna compete in a free market. Are you kidding me? When we have the power and we can just steamroll and jail whoever we want. This is how MAGA thinks. This is how Trump thinks.
It's almost like they see democracy as weak. And I don't know if this is true. I need to fact check this, but I heard this week that sociologists say that about 30% of people are authoritarian, just naturally predisposed to authoritarianism. You're thinking, goodness me. So in America or in the UK or wherever, like there are 30% of people that actually wouldn't mind a dictator that aligns with their own kind of other ideologies, right? And so that's super worrying because then they don't mind when, say, in the United States, you start dismantling the checks and balances. You start dismantling the democratic process. You talk about having ICE at voting booths. You talk about gerrymandering the crap out of any district you can find, and there's no problem with that. It's like, yeah, that's cool. Democracy is for weaklings. I don't know, maybe.
Democracy is the exception to human history and psychology. So this weird experiment of one man, one vote, we all have a say in how our government is run. This is a modern concept. Sure, ancient Athens, the Greeks, a little bit under the Roman Empire when they were a republic. But the United States in 1776 declared their independence and said, we want to not have a dictator. No king, no emperor, no monarch. We're going to have, an executive. We'll call him, I guess, the president. He can't have any titles. We're going to refer to him just as Mr. President. So it's very simple and plain. George Washington took the job, and George Washington voluntarily gave up power after 2 terms and kind of set this precedent that you wouldn't be president for life. But we wanted checks and balances, and we wanted Congress to be supreme, the equivalent to Parliament. And it's Article 1 of the Constitution. These are supposed to be the people's representatives. And democracy is not supposed to be efficient. It's supposed to be chaotic and confusing and frustrating. And, losing an election sucks. When your side gets 49% of the vote and the other side gets 51, you feel pretty terrible for 4 years until you get another shot. But the beauty of democracy is you get another shot. And MAGA wants to end that. Trump has been trying to go after, he wants to arrest George Soros for RICO violations because he says protesters are being paid. He's going after Act Blue, which is the donation platform for every Democrat in the country. Like, he is doing everything he can, and he's really dumb and he's really bad at it to end democracy. But where I'm going with this is that the natural human instinct is to gravitate towards strength. For 10,000 years of human civilization, we've had kings, we've had emperors, we've had monarchs, shahs, potentates. There's always one guy at the top who stays there for his entire life. Usually his son gets the job when he dies, and he's the final say on everything. And there is a strategy, just hoping that your monarch or potentate is benevolent and won't psychotically kill a lot of you. But that's, I do think you're right. A very large percent of Americans are fine with having a king, having a dictator, as long as he's their guy who will punish the people they hate and protect them against the fears or the crime and the immigrants and the trans people. Like, these people are delusional. Like, when I talk to the average Trump supporter, they are lost in conspiracy. They have been consumed on the internets with these right-wing influencers telling them the most insane things. Pizzagate was a conspiracy that children were being sex trafficked in the basement of this pizza shop in Washington, D.C., and somebody showed up at the pizza shop and shot at people. When this pizza shop doesn't even have a basement, there is no subterranean level. Like, that's how stupid these people are, and they take action.
But this translates into Tulsi Gabbard making ridiculous decisions, and my goodness, RFK Jr. this week gutting the CDC and then announcing he's going to make some declaration on what causes autism. And for sure it's going to be like the MMR vaccine or something. You got anti-vax kind of thinking at the heart of, it was one of the CDC people who just resigned after the head of the CDC was fired. He was on CNN the other day speaking to Caitlin Collins, and he said, RFK Jr. has not asked for our advice once. He's not come to the CDC once since taking control of the HHS. So as a main guy in charge of like science and health, if you like, in the United States, not to go to the number one institution for knowledge in that sector in the world, not to go to them for briefings, like not taking one single briefing from the CDC and then firing the top of the CDC because they don't fit with your agenda is insanely worrying.
MAGA is a war on science. MAGA is a war on facts and reality. And here's the thing about science is whatever is true for science here in the United States has to be true for scientists in Brazil, and true for scientists in China, and true for scientists in the UK or South Africa or Australia. There is no American science being manipulated where vaccines cause autism. If vaccines cause autism, any scientist, any doctor, any laboratory technician or researcher could prove this. You can say, oh, the evil American pharmaceutical companies just want to make profit and they're injecting us with poison. Then why do they do it in other countries? Like, American pharmaceutical companies are so powerful that they can force scientists in Japan to poison their own people. Like, these conspiracies, when you think them through and you get outside of America's bubble, they don't hold up. But MAGA is committed to their conspiracies because this is what they have sold their supporters to get into power. Now, RFK Jr. is an idiot. I mean, he could be, he's an environmental lawyer. That's his training and background and work experience. He's an environmental lawyer who doesn't seem to care about the environment anymore. But yeah, he has no medical knowledge. He has only read what he wants to read to reinforce what he wants to believe is true. And for some reason, the last 20 years, he has dedicated his life to vaccine conspiracies. And he's killed a lot of people promoting these conspiracies, measles outbreaks, as well as other infectious diseases that could have been prevented
in Samoa,
if a Kennedy hadn't been promoting vaccine conspiracies for these last 20 years. And now he's the Secretary of Health and Human Services, and he is objectively making everyone sicker. And here's the thing is I have so much sympathy for the MAHA movement, Make America Healthy Again. I would love for Americans to not die from diabetes. I read a book recently, The Case Against Sugar, and more people in the 20th century died of diabetes than all wars combined. Did you know that?
That's insane. Yeah, I had heard that. Absolutely
More
insane.
people in the 1900s, the 20th century, died of diabetes than all wars combined. And the reason is because of sugar. We have been putting sugar into everything. It's in our cereal, it's in our juices, it's in our coffee, it's in everything. And sugar is a carbohydrate in small quantities. It's not a big deal. But chronic overconsumption for decades is what is causing all of these debilitations. It's why Americans are so sick and unhealthy. So RFK Jr. gets into office, and rather than actually promote, eating food that contain vitamins, minerals, antioxidants, protein, and fiber, he's saying, what if we took high fructose corn syrup out of Coca-Cola and put back in real sugarcane from the tropics? That'll make us healthy again.
Yeah, and then it gets worse, because the person they're going to put in charge of the CDC is a Peter Thiel Heritage Foundation guy. So Jim O'Neill has been named the new CDC director, ex-Thiel Foundation director, former partner in Peter Thiel's Mithril Capital, longtime Thiel insider, championing FDA reform straight out of Thiel's playbook. It is, by the way, he's also got absolutely no expertise to be in the position of being in charge of the CDC. It's Palantir's health department. I do worry about Palantir and about Peter Thiel, especially as we're hearing that Peter Thiel's also getting involved with Reform UK in the UK, and Nigel Farage, and writing their budget and so on and so forth.
When I was in college, I actually found Alex Jones. I'm sure you know who Alex Jones is.
Yep.
And I remember, like, in 2004, 2005, 2006, I was watching Alex Jones in InfoWars because he was against the Iraq War. And it was hard to get information, because corporate mainstream media was entirely pro-Iraq War, supporting everything that George Bush was doing. So I was looking for the counter narrative. And the conspiracies that they were promoting back then was billionaires want to microchip us. Billionaires want to, euthanize us and eliminate 90% of the global population, replace us with robot servants, and then, it'll be a lot easier for them to control and manage everything in the world. That's the global conspiracy of the shape-shifting lizard people trying to, this is what Alex Jones was saying 20 years ago. And now we have these insane billionaires, Peter Thiel and Elon Musk, who are obsessed with getting our information, developing AIs, controlling us, manipulating us. They're throwing their money around, and I don't think they have our best interests at heart. These men are amoral. How many children does Elon Musk now have? He just texts random, female right-wing influencers saying, "Do you want $1 million to have another one of my babies and sign this NDA?" Like, the guy is insane, objectively. And Peter Thiel is worse. Peter Thiel doesn't like the spotlight. He doesn't make very many public appearances. But when he does do a podcast or an interview, that guy's insane. And I don't want him in charge of anything. And with Trump getting back into office, it's all about just handing over everything to Peter Thiel and Elon Musk. They get all the contracts. The military is being integrated with Palantir. This is the dystopian future that Alex Jones warned the right about 20 years ago. And these guys just walked right in.
It's a dark irony there.
The people most was Joe Biden really the deep state guy? The guy who liked trains and riding his bicycle and eating ice cream? That was the authoritarian coming to microchip you and euthanize you and sterilize you? Like, I don't understand these people, but
it's such a good point, because when you look at Peter Thiel and Elon Musk and David Sachs and these sorts of Brodegards,
these people
they are running the country.
They could not have any more contempt for the average person on the street. They view these people as beneath them. They have no humanity, no love for the common person, and yet it's through controlling Twitter and a social media platform, they have tricked all the dumbest people in America to champion them, worship them, and believe they have their best interests at heart when these people are objectively monsters.
So taking a little step back to where we were, so talking about, say, Donald Trump and Ukraine, like who's popping here says to me, look, you're frustrated with Trump because you still believe he will change and help Ukraine when evidence points to the contrary. My opinion on Donald Trump is that if he eventually helps Ukraine, it won't be because like he wants to from an ideological position. It's because he accidentally does it, or he does it because actually it fulfills some other criteria such as self.
Jonathan, can I jump in here?
Yeah.
Trump might end up helping Ukraine because Putin will tell him to F off. Putin is so annoyed by Trump. Putin hates Trump. Putin thinks Trump's a fucking loser. But if Trump ends up helping Ukraine, it's because the Russians will say, we're done with this. We don't want to give you anything. We don't want to talk to you. We don't want to negotiate with you. We want to see America destroyed. Full stop. Final. We don't want to ally with you against China. We're with China 100%. Go away. That's the only scenario in which Trump will finally help Ukraine.
So this kind of fits in with something I was saying the other day. So the Portuguese president has just come out and said, look, Trump is functionally a Russian asset. So I presume you'd heard that news. It was all over.
Because he is.
Yeah, absolutely, 100%. And then you've had a few people recently, so Macron and Merz are starting to, even Merz today, it's interesting that he's actually starting to blame Russia for being at war with Germany. So he's really speaking in an explicit manner about how Russia are the bad guys, but also saying that there's going to be no meeting between Putin and Zelensky. So, blah, blah, blah. And my position has been that leaders need to overtly say to Trump that he is the lapdog. You say it in a way that is subtle enough so it doesn't look like you're overtly criticizing Trump. But I mean, Portuguese leader did it really obviously there, but then I don't think he's a big enough leader to really worry Trump. But
which is why he said that.
Yeah, but I think what you need are leaders to actually make Trump go on the defensive. So he gets really insulted and say, so if you say, Trump, you're just a lapdog of Putin, you are so manipulatable by Putin, you are putting Putin's hand, then that's the sort of thing that's going to make him go, no, I'm not. And then rather than go the other way and be closer to Putin, like the hope would be that he fights against that and then actually starts realizing that or at least being confrontational to Putin. I don't know, just a hope.
European leaders can't do that. It's okay for you to say that and for me to say that. That's our job.
Yeah.
And the president of Portugal, it's a small enough country where it doesn't matter. I don't think Trump even is going to waste his time responding to the president of Portugal. But for the UK, for France, for Germany, no, please do not get confrontational with Trump, because Trump can always make things more difficult for Ukraine. Right now, weapons are being sold for profits to European partners that are being supplied to Ukraine. This is the only thing that Donald Trump is doing to help anyone. And it's important. These ERAM missiles showing up, as well as Patriot air defense missiles and HIMARS, like good stuff that is killing Russians on the battlefield is still being delivered to Ukraine miraculously. I'm sure this frustrates Putin and the Russians want it to stop. But as long as Trump is still willing to sell weapons, and I don't know how Trump could justify ever saying no because America's making money, but as long as Trump is willing to sell weapons, we're still getting value out of him. It's still helping the war effort, even though he is doing the bare minimum. He could be doing so much more to make this war end faster, but he wants to, in the end, be allied with Russia and be friends with Russia, which I think the Russians are going to stop pretending like that's even a possibility, and they're going to be the ones to tell Trump to get lost.
Yeah. So having said what I said about, saying that overtly that Trump is putting Putin's hand. Actually, you're exactly right, because I've said equally what you just said, that those particular, and it's not to say that, the UK is bigger and better than Portugal, but in terms of GDP and in terms of a relationship with the United States, it has a different place. And so same with Germany and France, right? And so some people in my audience have questioned why people like Keir Starmer don't just stand up to Trump. And it's because if Keir Starmer stands up to Trump and says something like that, if you're going to say that, you have to do it really subtly so Trump gets the point but isn't like insulted by it. Or you let the what I'm really saying is the media needs to say this. The media needs to go to Trump and say, you are just putty in Putin's hand. But we can't expect Merz and Macron and Starmer to go and stand up in a way that many people expect, because, and they say they're just spineless for not doing it, because Trump is so volatile that he turns around and you've suddenly got another 25% tariffs on you. And the UK economy is so precarious at the moment that would just destroy us. So, you know, and the US provides things to Ukraine that are absolutely vital, like the things you said, but also intelligence and whatnot. And if you piss Trump off too much, he will go the other way. What you want him to do is be pissed off that he's perceived by the outside world to be a pawn in Putin's chess game. But you don't want someone like Starmer or Merz to do that, because it would be counterproductive. So, sorry, just to express.
I don't know how anyone, you know, I get these hate comments on my YouTube channel, people who support Trump but also support Ukraine and somehow still watch me. I don't care about these people. I think these people are idiots. If you care about human rights and you care about democracy, then you cannot support Trump. Trump does not care about human rights, and he's doing everything he can to subvert democracy here in the United States. This redistricting fight happening in Texas, this has never happened before, where a sitting president mid-census, because we do a census every 10 years to redraw the district maps, halfway through the census cycle, he's saying, I want to redistrict Texas so that I can pick up another 5 seats and hold on to power. There is no illusion. Like, this is going to go to the courts, and I don't know how the Supreme Court...
Said it out loud on the news. He just says it.
Yeah, well, Trump has so much contempt for Congress and the legislative process. He does not believe that the people's representatives should have any say or power in anything, no input. For every Republican in Congress, these people are losers. They have no say. They have no input. If they show up at the White House, they have to flatter Trump, kiss his ass, and they'll get a hat at the gift shop when they leave. But these are all millionaires. You know, if you made it to Congress to get elected and to get seated in power, you probably did something right in your life. You're highly educated. You probably have a law degree or a business degree. You made millions before running for Congress. You have your own ego. You have your own pride. And you have to swallow all of it to be subordinate to this Big Mac eating, really shitty business person. Like, Trump was really bad at business his entire life. He inherited a lot of money from his father and all of the real estate from his father. And this is just New York, Manhattan real estate that was underpriced in the 1980s, that then appreciated in value in the 90s and 2000s. But all of the real businesses that were Trump's ideas or initiatives have all failed. The casinos and Trump University and Trump Steaks. Like, if Donald Trump, there was an analysis I saw once that if Donald Trump had just taken all of his father's money and put it into S&P 500 index funds and spent 40 years finger painting, he would be wealthier today than if he had been doing all of these stupid business and real estate deals.
But add to that now that actually 50% of his wealth is supposedly generated since January the 21st.
Oh, he's been making billions every month for him and his children, engaging in corruption, the crypto coin, as well as these deals with the Saudis. He is for sale, and he wants everyone in the world to know he is for sale. Show up at the White House, get a meeting, offer him and his children something, hundreds of millions of dollars, a free plane, whatever, and you will get whatever you want. The White House is for sale. National security of America. TikTok should be banned. Congress voted to ban TikTok. They gave him a year to sell, and TikTok refused. Like, the Chinese Communist Party said, we will shut down the platform before we give it up. We're not going to sell TikTok to Oracle or to Cisco or some other tech company to take it over. And Trump says, okay. I can't remember what the Chinese gave him, but oh yeah, there was somebody linked to TikTok who bought like $30 million worth of Trump's crypto coin or something. And then Trump just keeps extending the deadline for TikTok to be sold, when really he only had one authority to do that. I'm sorry, Jonathan, there's so many headlines. There's so much insane stuff happening every day. Like it's exhausting. And this is part of Trump's strategy, flood the zone, where the next crazy thing happens and you just kind of push out your brain the thing that happened last week.
You're quite right, because if I think, goodness me, there were things I was worried. I've got so much content to do for my US political videos, and I've still got like
Tulsi Gabbard just exposed the undercover identity of a CIA agent this week.
Yeah, in Russia.
Pete Hegseth leaked classified information to a journalist in a group signal chat, and he was never fired. There's no hearings, there's no investigations, there's no accountability. They just do stupid and illegal things every day, and we just go on to the next day for the next stupid and illegal thing. And America is not a real country anymore. And
I mean, this kind of fire hose of craziness is stopped, you know, mainstream media organizations from being able to track this and hold the government to account, because as soon as you get an opportunity to talk about this thing that's so horrific, something else has happened the next day, and it starts again, and it's just, there is just too much going on. Just going back to Trump and Zelensky and the peace negotiations and whatnot, just want your thoughts on this. So this has happened today. Trump once again has compared Russia's war on Ukraine to, quote, two children fighting on a playground. But in this picture, the only child is Trump himself, incapable of adult words or serious analysis, says Null reports, reducing a brutal war to playground brawls. But then Trump told the Daily Caller a Ukraine-US-Russia summit will happen and he'll attend, though he's unsure if Putin will meet Zelensky. He added the war may require a little more fighting. Security guarantees for Ukraine will come mainly from Europe, and no US troops are deployed. More Trump BS maybe. What are your thoughts on all of this, kind of the idea of peace negotiations, the likelihood of Putin ever meeting with Zelensky, and Trump's role in all of this?
Trump is lying. Trump just lies about everything. And Trump enjoys misinterpreting and mishearing things and then declaring it as a fact. This is one of Trump's strategies, where he just says something is true when it's not. And then the person who was misinterpreted feels awkward. Like, do I correct the president? Do I correct Trump? Or do I just go along with what he misinterpreted or misheard? When Trump didn't misinterpret, he didn't mishear anything. He's lying. He's making stuff up. So Trump is trying to put pressure on Putin to agree to a summit by saying that Putin agreed to a summit when Putin never agreed, obviously. The Russians and Lavrov cleared this up on Meet the Press. Lavrov said Putin is willing to meet with Zelensky when all of Russia's conditions have been met.
Yeah.
Meaning
that's never gonna happen.
Ukraine is ready to capitulate and surrender. When even then, if Ukraine was willing to surrender, Putin still wouldn't meet with Zelensky. Why would you meet with the head of a state that has already agreed to surrender to you? Russia is delusional. They lie about everything. Trump is delusional. He lies about everything. So when you have two compulsive liars making everything up, getting together in the same room, yeah, there's going to be some confusion. There's going to be some misleading headlines. There's going to be Putin is never going to meet Zelensky. There's no reason to, when Putin's objective is genocide, to kill all these people and take their stuff. Why would you want to sit down and share a coffee and some biscuits with a guy you're trying to kill and whose country you're trying to steal by force?
Yeah, absolutely. So talking about a potential end to this war, where do you see the war at the moment? I mean, Ukraine are obviously focusing on hitting hydrocarbons. They're trying to substitute human beings on the front line with unmanned ground vehicles, UGVs and UAVs, trying to have drone corridors to do the work of humans, because they need boots on the ground. But hitting things from distance is something that doesn't expend humans. There are no casualties when you send drones into Russia from a Ukrainian point of view. So you got the development of these new drones, these new missiles, and so on and so forth. And you might have an economic collapse on the horizon for the Russians. Are they going to have recruitment issues? Are they having recruitment issues? Where do you see the war at the moment in the kind of the ebbs and flows of this conflict?
I hope these Flamingo missiles are real. This promo video put out was from the company, obviously trying to promote themselves because they're looking for more investment. And the per unit cost of a Flamingo missile is just under $1 million. These are expensive. And they say they want to increase production to 7 or 8 a day by October, but they need more funding. They need more money. I hope this is all legitimate. I hope this is all real. If Ukraine has, a long-range cruise missile that can go over 1,000 kilometers and hit Moscow, hit St. Petersburg, and it has, I think it's at a 10-meter CEP range, so this is pretty accurate. If this is real, Russia's in serious trouble. Now, if I was in charge of Ukraine's military, I would be a bit more brutal in what I targeted inside of Russia. I think Ukraine, to not lose the support of Western and democratic nations, has been holding back on certain targets. But this is total war. This is a genocide. I think tankers, that Shadow Fleet tankers returning to Russia empty, as long as they're empty, I don't know why those are not being sunk by drone boats. I think those are fair targets. If a tanker that is illegitimate, shipping Russian crude oil around the world, is returning empty, Ukraine should take a shot at it. I also think Ukraine should be going after thermal power plants. If all of Ukraine's thermal power plants were destroyed by the Russians, deliberately targeted, Russia said they're fair military targets, then those are the rules of the war, and Ukraine has to fight back. We can't have asymmetrical warfare. All of these Baltic countries and Poland pulling out of the Ottawa Treaty, this is for landmines. They did it because it's asymmetrical. The Russians never agreed to it. The Russians use landmines. And I understand there's some things that Ukraine would never do and shouldn't do, such as torturing people or mistreating POWs. There's no reason to do that. But as far as what are they choosing to target inside of Russia, they need to expand that list if they want this war to actually end.
Yeah. So, and do you see Ukraine in any trouble at the moment? What are you most concerned about with Ukraine going forward?
Ukraine has been trading land for time for 3.5 years, and they've done a phenomenal job. The battlefield is not the scoreboard. When Russia takes a wheat field or a small farm village with 10 houses that have all been destroyed, that doesn't mean Russia is making progress. Ukraine has been trading land for time for 3.5 years to get to the point that I think we're close to, in that all of Russia's sectors and industries are in pre-bankruptcy or going bankrupt. And we're not that far. In my last video, I saw this video from Maxim Kalishnikov. He's a Russian propagandist, but he was talking about how all the water in the occupied territories has been contaminated because of irrigation canals being destroyed or diverted. The occupied territories don't have fresh water. All of their water and waste treatment facilities have gone idle or have broken down. And the boiler systems require on purified or clean drinking water to properly function. Because contaminated water has been going through these boiler systems, they've been destroying them. So Russians in the occupied territories, this water, are not going to have proper heating systems. It's unfortunate for the civilians remaining in the territories, but they just have to leave. They have to leave until the war is over, and then they can return. But for the 600, 700, 800,000 Russian troops in the occupied territories this winter, they're not going to have clean drinking water or heat, which sounds like a really bad situation for a fighting force. This is not the situation with the Ukrainian side. They still get bottled water, clean drinking water. They still have means to warm themselves up. And government services in Dnipro, in Kharkiv, in Zaporizhia, Kherson's a different story. It's unfortunate what's happening in Kherson. But the other big cities continue to function like normal, whereas Russia can't do that in the occupied territories when Luhansk and Donetsk, the proper urban cities, have not been getting bombed for the entirety of this war.
Yeah, interesting. I just want to let people know that we are doing a fundraiser at ATP Geopolitics. It's linked in the description below. We're starting another campaign for for Car for Ukraine. I've driven out some trucks for Car for Ukraine previously. And actually, when I was out there, I also handed over some NAFO trucks at one of the NAFO rallies for Jake Broe on behalf of Jake. So that was all good. But please go to the fundraiser, go to ATP Geopolitics, make sure you're on that on that part of the campaign. Autumn harvest, and then you can help out there, and there are lots of things you can get, sort of patches and pins and all sorts. So please help out Car for Ukraine. They're a wonderful bunch of people doing really, really good work. I'm just going to do a few thanks, Jake, and then there's a couple of questions as we sort of meander our way to a close at some point. Just a few statements from people and super chats and whatnot. So thank you, Kevin Forst, for the ATP Geopolitics memberships. Really kind, incredibly generous of Niels Clement as well with the 10 ATP Geopolitics memberships. Goose Springsteen said, just an aside, Times newspaper article had a really moving photo article yesterday by Anthony Lloyd about facial reconstructive surgery in Ukraine. Ukraine are going to be at the forefront of many things after this war. There's silver lining to some very dark clouds, and one of them will be, I'm sure, working on prosthetics and injuries and whatnot and rehabilitation. Thank you, Goose. Mitch Mazzarol from Canada says, let's game out a post-Trump foreign policy under a Vance admin. Based on what we currently know about his core values, if there are any, this needs to be considered as a new normal, possibly quite soon. So we were talking about this, Jake, just before, and thanks, Mitch, just before we went live, and you were talking about Trump's health issues because he's not been seen for a couple of days and then suddenly he's playing golf. But there are people talking about, his cankles and his heart condition and then not being around for a few days. But then the problem is if Trump was to become too ill, you get Vance, and Vance is arguably more ideologically problematic than Trump. What's your view on that?
The average life expectancy for an American male is 78 years old. So Trump has already beat the average. But Trump is obese, he's overweight, and Trump doesn't take it easy. When you reach the age of 80, he's 79, but you should not be having stressful days because, your mind and your heart and your limbs have all been working hard for decades. And I'm convinced that Trump doesn't listen to medical advice. He doesn't listen to anyone. Yeah. So why would he listen to doctors? So I'm sure there are the best doctors in America telling him what he needs to take and what he needs to do to extend his life as much as possible. And Trump just does whatever he wants. He just does whatever he wants every day. I think he is mentally gone where I don't think he could take a pill regimen to, extend his life and maintain everything he needs to maintain to stay in office. So I'm convinced we're going to wake up at some point in the next 2 years and we're going to get the headline that Trump is dead. He had a stroke or a heart attack or something to incapacitate him where he's not doing the job anymore. And J.D. Vance will become president. I have mentally accepted this, that at some point in the next 2 years, J.D. Vance will be President Vance. And the good news is that nobody likes J.D. Vance. The only reason why Trump picked him, he was a U.S. senator from Ohio who had only been serving for 2 years when Trump picked him. That is insane.
Because
that
a guy Peter Thiel. I mean,
well, that's the thing.
The advice apparently came from Thiel and Musk.
Well, Thiel and Musk. Elon Musk, this was before Elon Musk was full-throated behind Trump. And Elon Musk met with Donald Trump Jr. and J.D. Vance and Peter Thiel, and they agreed it had to be Vance. Trump wanted to pick RFK Jr.
Yeah.
Trump's personal choice for vice president was RFK Jr. because he liked him. Oh. And Elon Musk said, I will only bend the Twitter algorithm to make sure you become president. I will only give you $300 million of my own money so that you can become president if you pick our guy. So J.D. Vance's prior work experience to becoming a U.S. senator was he was Peter Thiel's intern.
Yeah.
Peter Thiel, J.D. Vance's backstory, he's from Ohio and Kentucky, and he served in the Marines, but he was a press officer. So he spent 6 months in Iraq just putting out press releases in an air-conditioned room. He didn't do any fighting. He didn't bag and tag anyone. He's not a macho guy. He then, when he got out of the military, went to Yale I think he graduated from Yale Law School. He then wrote a best-selling book, Hillbilly Elegy. And these clips of J.D. Vance in 2016 and 17, he's a liberal. He's Donald Trump is our Hitler, and he is a terrible guy, and we need to stop Donald Trump. He then met Peter Thiel at a party, and Peter Thiel liked him. Peter Thiel then took him under his wing and mentored him for a couple of years. And J.D. Vance was put on the board of like pharmaceutical companies. And these pharmaceutical companies that were getting angel investments from Peter Thiel were annoyed because J.D. Vance doesn't have any knowledge about business or pharmaceuticals or the healthcare industry or anything. So J.D. Vance became a U.S. senator because Peter Thiel said, I want to buy a senator seat. So there was an open seat in Ohio. J.D. Vance won the primary because Peter Thiel spent $16 million of his own money making sure that he won the primary. J.D. Vance is an entirely artificial construct. He's not a real person. He's not a real human being. He doesn't have his own opinions or ideas. He just does what anyone tells him to do because he likes the attention and he's getting more money. But I mean, if you listen to J.D. Vance talk, you know he's just kind of like a fake person. He's 41 years old, which means people older than him are not going to listen to him. And the benefit is he doesn't have the devotion to the base. So the big fear with Trump is that if you are a member of Congress and you oppose Trump, he'll show up in your district and primary you. He'll endorse a primary candidate and just get rid of you. Goodbye, Bob Corker. Goodbye, Jeff Flake. Goodbye, Mitt Romney. Goodbye, all of these independent, critical thinking Republican congressmen. Trump got rid of them all. J.D. Vance doesn't have this superpower. So when J.D. Vance becomes president, even he tries to use the bully pulpit, nobody's going to listen to him. The courts aren't going to listen to him. I don't think the military is going to listen to him. Like, can you imagine J.D. Vance telling a 4-star general to deploy Marines to bag and tag people on the streets of Chicago? Like, Trump saying it, I think there is some hesitation. He's still getting pushback, but nobody is going to listen to or take J.D. Vance serious once he's president.
Yeah, I there's nothing I particularly disagree with there for sure. But unfortunately, he's also like well ensconced in the tech authoritarianism of Peter Thiel, and also the kind of Heritage Foundation ideology that I think is sown.
It's a false utopia. This bubble is going to collapse. I'm convinced that almost every crypto coin in the world is going to be rendered useless eventually. Eventually, we are going to develop quantum computing or some kind of new technology in which the blockchain of Bitcoin and Ethereum and all these other coins will be corrupted. And you cannot trust the ledger. This is my personal theory. I can't talk to these people because they've adopted it as their religion. I don't buy, sell, trade any crypto coins. I think they're all going to become worthless eventually. That was the opinion of Charlie Munger before he died. That's the opinion of Warren Buffett. I'm going to stick with those guys. They understand decades of business and investing. But Bitcoin is a 2009 technology. This is a completely different topic, but you got me going here. Do you know what the number one selling phone in America was in 2009?
I don't know, some kind of Nokia maybe.
The Nokia Motorola Razr Edge 3. Would you buy a Motorola Razr Edge 3 phone today? No, but that's 2009 technology, and that's what Bitcoin is. We are going to continue inventing new technologies and alternatives, and I don't think we're at the final form yet. Anybody holding a lot of Bitcoin in their wallet, I think some Russian or Chinese hacker or something is going to eventually render that technology obsolete, and the value will go to zero. There is no intrinsic value to any crypto coin. With stocks, you have the equity of the company. With bonds, you're giving guarantees from a government. With real estates, obviously there's the land and the physical assets. Gold is gold, silver is silver, but crypto is all imaginary. And I think Peter Thiel and Elon Musk know this, but they still sell it to their followers because what's in it for them? You know, you have to offer people this financial incentive to get them to continue believing your nonsense and BS. But I do think the tech bro culture and industry is going to collapse on itself because they're morally bankrupt. They offer nothing of substance to the human mind and condition. It's all about follow me and you'll get rich, but
Yeah.
it's all hollow. It doesn't mean anything.
Thank you very much, Julian Roster, for gifting those ATP Geopolitics memberships. Really appreciate that, mate. BME, always a great supporter. Grab a beverage of your choosing, preferably from the little whiskey shop. That's Mark's little whiskey shop. Great supporter of Ukraine. Tricky one. So Goose Springsteen, hard topic, but Ukraine faces a really tricky post-war. It has a worse demographic pyramid than Russia. So yeah, it's got the lowest birth rate in the world and the highest mortality rate in the world. And unless forced, it's an open question if the millions of refugees will leave the West. What would you see happening after the war? And obviously, it's going to be a case of trying to attract as many Ukrainians back home as possible. But it's really difficult because the longer the war goes on, the more you put your roots down elsewhere.
Ukraine's future is in the European Union being part of the European system, and they're going to need immigration from other parts of the world. If, let's say maybe a lot of people from Turkey would want to resettle in Crimea, there will just be a large Turkish population in Crimea then. I don't know. I mean, it's up for Ukraine politically to decide what their immigration policies are. Traditionally, after a war ends, though, there is kind of like a baby boom when the soldiers come home and they want to settle down, start a family. So there could be a demographic revival, but it takes 2 decades for those kids to grow up and then start paying taxes. But I mean, Ukraine doesn't have an alternative. Whatever solutions people are going to have to find in a post-war Ukraine, that's a problem for down the road. I don't think anyone should be worrying about that while cities are being bombed.
Thank you very much to Who's Poppin'. Ex-MI6 spy Chris Steele's 2016 report highlighted that Russian oligarchs have been laundering money and buying, selling Trump Tower condos all over the world. So yeah, I mean, go and read a good book by Luke Harding called Collusion. That's well worth reading to get a sense of what's going on there. Goose Springsteen slander, I think this is to you, talking about 1776, maybe. Poor George III. Jake, those delicious taxes were needed to pay the bill for defending you in the 7 Years' War and for the military policing to stop you breaking treaties with the Native Americans. I don't know enough about that, Goose Springsteen, but thank you very much for the support, and I'm sure you've prodded Jake in. So
since he brought up this topic, I just want to point out that the Boston Tea Party was about tariffs. The colonialists were upset about paying an import tariff, an import tax on tea. And here we have King Donald Trump placing tariffs on everyone. What Donald Trump is doing to America is what we fought a revolution about. It's so stupid.
Which, as Rudy Herman says, and thank you, Rudy, in the news today or yesterday, Trump's tariffs are illegal. So an appeals court did, because he's basically asserted some kind of economic or some kind of emergency due to Venezuelan gangs being sent by Venezuela into the US, and therefore we're being invaded. It's emergency. So he then signs all these executive orders and then unilaterally decides there are tariffs, and that's something that Congress should normally do. And actually, an appeals court has found that most of the tariffs are illegal. Now, I don't know if that's going to will he actually listen to the courts here? What will take place?
So with everything that Congress does, there's usually a carve out for emergencies because Congress goes into recess. So like Congress has been in recess right now for 6 weeks. So if there is a disaster or an emergency, the president is given authority to act, including tariffs. Like, I don't know the name of the bill or the law, but if Congress is in recess and there's an emergency, the president has the authority to unilaterally place tariffs to do whatever. But that's not what Trump's been doing. Trump has just been making up or inventing an emergency that doesn't actually exist so he can do whatever he wants. So there's the federal courts, and this is the appellate court. So Trump must have already lost at the federal court level. It was then appealed to an appellate court. He lost at the appellate court. It's now going to go to the Supreme Court. The Republican appointed judges is 6-3. And Trump's not flipping out or losing his S because he thinks when it goes to the Supreme Court, he'll at least get 5-4. Maybe he'll lose Justice Roberts. But if Kagan, Kavanaugh, Amy Baron Cohen, like the three that he
Well,
appointed.
yeah,
just
but Amy
stick
Baron
with.
Cohen has been like interestingly ruling against him a number of times, which I find quite fascinating. So there's a hope.
Why, if you have dedicated your life to studying the Constitution and upholding the Constitution, why would you enable a dictator? Why would you allow? Here's the thing, Jonathan: is everyone's just waiting for him to die. They're just waiting for him to die and for the spell of the cult to be broken. When you look into the eyes of Marco Rubio is the son of an immigrant,
He's
from
died
Cuba.
inside so many times.
But he is sitting there, motionless in the White House, willing to say and do whatever Donald Trump does. And I see the look in Rubio's eyes, and I know he's saying, if I just sit here and take it, if I just sit here and do what I have to do, Donald Trump will be dead in the next 2 years, and then I might even become vice president. Or actually, that would be really weird if JD Vance became president.
But then Trump turns around to him in the cabinet meeting while Marco Rubio's doodling. So he spends the whole time not looking up, doodling, because everything is so freaking embarrassing for this 3 hour, 20 minute, 3 hour, 15 minute cabinet meeting where they're all fawning over him, dear leader. He's doodling. And then he thinks, oh, I'm dreaming of being president one day. And then Trump turns around to him and say, you're never going to be president because you're too good at being Secretary of State. Just this real barbed, damned by this kind of weird praise.
Trump loves humiliating people that are not true believers. Trump knows who is the true believer and who is the sellout, just trying to be in Trump's orbit. And Trump knows who the two people are, and he's willing to just exploit them. Like, he derives pleasure from humiliating Marco Rubio. Like, Trump probably cuts gas in front of Rubio all the time just to make him smell him. Like, Trump is a disgusting, like, that's what people say who are close to Trump. Is that he reeks.
Always talking about this.
Like, he smells horrible now because he's an elderly man, but Trump derives pleasure from this, just torturing and humiliating Rubio, debasing him.
What do you think he thinks about Vance then? Like, truly? Because Vance gave him the whole, like, insults, and so Vance is no different from Rubio.
Vance serves, Vance is very peculiar because, you can watch these interviews on MSNBC and CNN from 2016-17 when he was all against Trump and he was selling his book. But then he met Peter Thiel, and I don't know what Peter Thiel did to him or said to him, but Peter Thiel sold him on this vision of America and this vision of the future. And apparently that was enough for JD Vance to forget his blue collar roots. Like, the big, beautiful bill is going to destroy rural economies in red states. Like, if you were this impoverished kid from Appalachia and you wanted to go to Washington, D.C. to make average life for the working white man in rural America, like, JD Vance is the biggest sellout in the history of the country. He met his first billionaire after graduating from Yale Law School and said, I'm never going back. Screw all of my countrymen, my kin from Appalachia. I am going to sell out to Silicon Valley interests. And his wife is Indian. He has biracial children who look brown. And he is supporting the most racist policies in my lifetime, the last 40 years in America. It's a complete contradiction. And once again, I don't think the MAGA base is ever going to fully embrace JD or make him, the successor to Trump, because he's not authentic. Like, it just bleeds that he is faking it for the power and clout.
So, Andrew Perpetuan, thank you for all your work, Andrew, and your team. I always say this, we need to have a chat. Come on, and let's have a live chat soon, Andrew, because you watch all these videos on a daily basis. You have one of the greatest grasps of actually what's going on from a real granular level, but then take it up to the macro level as well. And interesting, Andrew, I do read your tweets at the moment and kind of nod my head in your exasperated frustration of what the hell's going on concerning Ukraine, but also the US. But Andrew says, I did the maths maths of Trump, Putin, and Xi's chances of surviving to the next US presidential election. 60.3% all three live, 6.7% only Xi dies, 9.8% only Putin, 17% only Trump, 1.1% Xi and Putin but not Trump, 1.9% Trump and Xi but not Putin, 2.8% Trump and Putin but not Xi, and 0.3% all three bite the dust. So there you go. I don't know. I can't verify the methodology there, but thank you, Andrew, for doing a bit of work there. So we shall see. We shall see which probability was, turns out to be accurate. Yeah, old people running the world, and we've heard about the health problems of Putin. Do you think Putin, Jake? Do you think Putin is not? I wrote an article a couple of years back on his health issues, synthesizing all the evidence I could find, and I'm pretty sure he has got health issues. The same with Trump, but I think actually Putin's are probably more complex than Trump's, and I think he's got. He definitely holds on to things with this. I mean, it depends which Putin you're talking about, and there's another conversation to have. But I think he's definitely got something like. There are theories he's got Parkinson's. There's theories he's got a cancer, that he went to Israel to get the best cancer treatment. That's why his relationship with Israel is quite complicated. I don't know. What are your thoughts?
I don't know. I don't know if that was the real Putin who showed up in Alaska. I don't think we can bank on this. I don't think we can just assume that Putin is going to die soon. I do remember, there was speculation 3 years ago, and I even talked about it in a video about Putin's health and potentially is it failing. But, if we wake up and he's dead, bonus. That's a day to celebrate. But no, I don't think there should be any planning or assumptions. And I don't visibly see the evidence aside from Putin kind of wobbling and wiggling his legs, and he often grips the table to stop his hand from shaking. And could he have Parkinson's? Yes, but if properly treated, and Parkinson's is not a death sentence immediately. There's lots of debilitating conditions he might have, or in the early stages that will take decades to play out potentially. Putin could genuinely live his health. Obviously, somebody can always knife him in the back or poison him, but his health, I don't know, he might go a little bit longer.
Yeah, I mean, he seems to be stacked full of steroids. Just a couple more comments here. So, Greg Terry, good to hear from you, Greg, mate. The other key thing here is USA wants to benefit technologically because they are becoming more and more aware this is a drone war, and most nations led by the USA are woefully behind technologically. I was talking the other day about how the US isn't a member of the capability coalitions, probably because it thinks it doesn't need to be. I think I'm correct in saying that, but all these capability coalitions that are helping Ukraine, such as the, say, for example, drone capability coalition run by the British and Latvians, but with all these other countries, there's no such thing as a free lunch. They're all supporting Ukraine the same. Just generally, anyone that supports Ukraine, they're doing it for strategic reasons, for economic reasons, for political reasons, for military reasons, etc., etc. But helping with capability coalitions, there's a feedback loop there. There's we're helping you, but actually we're getting the very best opportunity to get the world's greatest technology back into our own hands. But the US are in this interesting position where maybe they're not doing that. They want to have the best armed forces in the world, but they seem to be quite slow at learning, particularly with drones. Some people saying that they're still like looking at $100,000 drones rather than $250 drone type things. What's your thought on all that topic?
Well, the United States is behind Ukraine and Russia in drone development. But at the same time, why would you need all these small, cheap drones unless you're fighting a ground war with trenches, which the goal with the United States would never be do that. Yeah, did we need small attack drones to cripple Iran's nuclear facilities? Has Israel needed them in any of the wars they've been fighting the last 3.5 years? So I understand the argument, and it's there, but Ukraine doesn't have the air power that the United States or NATO has. And honestly, neither does Russia. Like, we've established that Russia was a paper tiger, and their Air Force, the fact that they couldn't get control of the skies, not even close, the opening weeks of the war and for the last 3.5 years, Russia's Navy has been humiliated. Their Air Force has been humiliated. But the reason why is because their ground forces couldn't advance. Like there were no cheap FPV drones attacking tanks the first year and a half, 2 years of the war. And Russia's ground forces still did not make the progress they needed to protect long term their Air Force and Navy from these retaliatory strikes. So the situation that played out for Russia would not play out for the United States if the United States chose to, for example, attack Venezuela. But obviously, this is still important tech that needs to be developed and integrated into American operations, because eventually it will be useful. And obviously, this is what counterinsurgents are going to be using in the future. We're already seeing this from the drug cartels. They've already adopted this new technology of cheap FPV drones, fiber optic cables being used, slamming into, police units trying to stop the drug trade. This is a huge problem.
Yeah, Andrew Perpetua, the thing about Americans is there are two camps of people. Camp one thinks airplanes solve all the problems, and camp two thinks electronic warfare solves all the problems. Neither consider what happens when they don't. I mean, I think it's a really interesting point about how America doesn't even plan on having close contact war in trenches and the need to use those short range drones, and that is really a fair point. Look, two more comments as far as I can work out. So thank you to all those who have super chatted and whatnot. Mal says Russian economy must collapse for Ukraine to prevail. I agree with this. Due to relative lack of frontline movement, do you think Russia believes they need to crush Ukraine's morale to prevail? Hence the big strikes recently. I think the larger question is, what do you think Trump's end goal is? I'm sure I asked you this last time, Jake. What do you think Putin's actual objective is now? And by that I mean, like, ideally he wants all of Ukraine, but surely he knows he can't get that. Ideally he would want Odessa and the whole of the coastline, but you can't realistically think you're going to get that. So what do you think his end game is?
Depopulation. When Trump destroys hospitals and schools and thermal power plants, he just wants to make the territory, he just wants people to leave. If you're a Ukrainian citizen and you've left to somewhere else in the world, that was Putin's objective, and you are fulfilling it. Now, is that a good goal? Is that a good objective? And I don't think it's really working. I mean, how many people remain in Ukraine? It's, I don't know, like 35 million, 32 million. Like, yeah, you got 7, 8, 9 million refugees who have fled the country, but you can't get rid of all of them. So Putin's objective is depopulation in the hopes that this leads to an economic or societal collapse in which basic services can't be provided, and this will weaken their military, weaken their resolve, and eventually Russia's ground forces can get their act together and start taking some larger cities.
So, because I've been talking about how the war is basically a attritional chicken. Who can not lose the most and last the longest, essentially? And the attritional chicken actually feeds into this economic collapse. So what Ukraine want is to trick the Russians for long enough and to a point where, and play for time for long enough for the Russian economy to collapse. But actually, you've just kind of made the case that Russia's doing that in reverse. So actually, we do have this kind of, both sides have the same kind of objective, which is to trick the other side. Obviously, that's going to be, your means to an end there, and a very serious one in a war, so that one side collapse societally or economically, or and then you can militarily prevail.
Ukraine will last longer because Russia is not giving them an option. What if Russia is allowed to take Odessa and Zaporizhia and Dnipro and Kharkiv and Kyiv? Could you imagine, how many people would disappear to these dungeons, these torture rooms? How many men who were associated with the military at all would be taken back to mainland Russia and probably just put in pits? What would happen to the women? What would happen to the children? Russia has proven they have no qualms with taking children from their families and then handing them off to random strangers in Siberia to repopulate their rural regions that have lost their own children or people due to emigration or the war. So for Ukrainians, they would love to take a deal. Like, I am convinced after 3.5 years, if there was a way to make the war stop, territorial concessions or whatever, they would do it. Like, they want to end the war, but Russia's not giving them a choice. because Putin wants it all. So the war will end when the Russian soldier is no longer willing to die for nothing. And for that to happen, Putin needs to be sending men that he's not even paying anymore into battle. So these companies, these brigades will defect or turn or surrender in mass once the paychecks stop, or the money they're being given once again doesn't even buy groceries for their family back home. We're not there. Everybody in the war zone, technically, even though they were coerced or pressured, they still signed a contract. They're still being paid. And so they're willing to keep the system going. But with an economic collapse, the money the soldiers are being paid won't cover their costs or be worth it. And that's when they'll just stop fighting. Like, it would be so easy for an entire brigade just to contact the Ukrainians and say, we're not going to do this. We're going to abandon our trenches. We'll come over to your side. Let us come. We'll surrender in mass. We'll just hang out until, the government in Moscow collapses or whatever. That day is going to come because, once again, the Russians are not giving the Ukrainians an alternative. The Ukrainians have to keep going because the Russians are only offering them genocide and annihilation.
Yeah, really, really sound point there. Andrew Perpetua, I think if Russia crosses the Dnipro River, Europe will enter the war. Interesting you say that because Macron has talked about that before. The French they've kind of war gained the crossing the Dnipro, and they think that is, so that may have something to that. And the final super chat, Rudy Herman says, if the real Putin dies, what will the other Putins do? I don't know, maybe get topless and go fishing or something. Ride some horses, grapple with some bears in their spare time. Who knows to that one. And thank you, Rudy, and thank you to all the super chatters. I just want to remind people that we are running a campaign. It's just kind of started. It's the autumn campaign for Car for Ukraine. And thank you for those who have donated today. Or in fact, everyone that's donated has only just sort of started. Please help out with that one. The link is in the description below. They are super people, Car for Ukraine. They are really worthy of our support. I've visited them. I've driven cars out to them. I've gone to their workshops. I've seen vehicles that have come back. They try to fix up that were riddled with bullet holes and all sorts. They put extra armor around the doors and they armor like the battery and parts of the grill and parts of the vehicle. They do a really good job. So I want to show you this actually, Jake, as a kind of like as we wind down here. This has just come out. So the US President Donald Trump has hinted in a telephone conversation with Indian Prime Minister Narendra Modi that New Delhi, as in India, should nominate him, or Modi should nominate him for the Nobel Peace Prize. This angered the Indian Prime Minister and sharply worsened relations between the politicians, the New York Times writes, citing people familiar with the conversation. He's just angling for that Nobel Peace Prize. When you understand that Donald Trump is that desperate for the Nobel Peace Prize, that this actually drives much of his geopolitical strategizing, if you can call it even strategizing, you really do. It explains an awful lot. Like, he really, really, really does want a Nobel Peace Prize. I mean, it's obvious, and he's got so many people wheeled out onto TV calling for it. And it's embarrassing. I mean, they were calling, who is it? It wasn't Chrissy Noem. Who was it? It was anyway. She was on Fox News calling for him and Melania Trump to get the Nobel Peace Prize. And wouldn't it be funny if they're the first couple in history to get the Nobel Peace Prize together? It's sickening. Any views on Nobel Peace Prize for Trump? Do you think he warrants it?
Well, first of all, the Indians and the Pakistanis have been fighting over Kashmir since the Great Partition. I don't know what year that was. Like, wasn't it like the early 1950s or whatever?
Yep, 1940.
This has been a frozen conflict, a conflicted. A lot of people have died over the fate of this territory between India and Pakistan and the legacy of British colonial rule. Blah blah blah. The thing is, Trump doesn't understand any of it. He doesn't.
Hang on, he said he stopped their nuclear war. Yeah, he does. He stopped their nuclear war.
He doesn't respect any of it. He knows nothing, and he did nothing. So India and Pakistan had a flare up because this occasionally happens, and they are the ones who decided not to use nuclear weapons or to escalate. Trump had nothing to do with it. Both India and Pakistan, the governments put out press releases saying, because Trump was immediately giving himself credit, this has nothing to do with reality. This has nothing to do with facts. Trump was immediately giving himself credit. This has nothing to do with reality. This has nothing to do with facts. Trump was immediately giving himself credit. This has nothing to do with reality. This has nothing to do with facts. Trump lives in an alternate universe where Trump believes that if he says something, it's true because he has tens of millions of Americans who believe everything he says. If Trump says the price of gasoline is now under $2 a gallon, there are tens of millions of Americans, his cult followers, who now believe gas is now under $2 a gallon. Like if the other country pays the import tariff and not Americans, people just believe it. So I forget who said the quote, but people now go online to determine what reality is. People are not living in reality, they're living online. And Donald Trump views himself as a god that can just invent whatever he wants. So yes, he wants this Nobel Peace Prize because Barack Obama got one. And it has been infuriating him that a black man has something that he doesn't. And it's so petty, so childish, so stupid. And he is just going to continue making stuff up that he's now saying that he has prevented or solved 10 wars in the last 7 months. And he is the most qualified candidate ever for a Nobel Peace Prize. When he attacked Iran, when he's threatening Venezuela, when he's threatening Panama and Greenland and Canada. And Trump is going to kill a lot more people before he leaves this earth. He is a terrible human being. And yeah, this is just childish, nonsensical foolishness talking about a peace prize. Did you see that clip of him stealing the FIFA players medal
so it's a World Club Championship, and then he got the trophy as well, which they then had to make because that was worth $230,000. I think he took that back and they had to make a replica. Then he kind of jokingly asked for the World Cup from Infantino in the Oval Office. I mean, he stole that medal, but someone reminded me that didn't Putin steal an NFL winner's ring or something? And there's a similarity there.
Yeah, he stole one of Bob Kraft's Patriot rings.
Right, yeah. And so you got Trump caught on camera pocketing a medal, and it's like, oh, Trump, Putin. It's just, yeah. But by the way, can I just take issue with what you're saying, that Trump doesn't know anything about the war in India or the conflict between India and Pakistan? Because he does. He gave us a knowledge that they've been fighting for hundreds and hundreds of years, and this thing's been going on for hundreds of years, and that he's the one that put a stop to it. So although it's 1947, as we know, I mean, oh no, yeah, Trump doesn't know what he's talking about, does he? Jake, you are going to freaking love this if this is true, right? So just before we came on, I just told you Jake was saying that he was talking about Trump's illness and or ailments, and lots of people haven't seen him for some time. And people are now, JD Vance was on camera being asked about what happens if Trump's ill. He says, I'm ready to take over. So there's a bit of priming going on there, maybe, with the vice president. But he's not been seen since, I can't remember what day it was. You said Tuesday or something. Then you told me that he has actually just been seen playing golf. I presume this was a video you're talking about. So this video, of course, the dude is playing golf again. So everyone's like, oh, no, he is alive. He's playing golf. Until someone has done this, pointed out that was from June the 28th. So that video
is a fake video.
So that video might well have been not from today. So, does the conspiracy theory have legs? And is he alive? Is he ill?
Well, he could just have maybe like a bruise on his face or something.
Yeah.
Trump is vain, and potentially something visually is off with him, or maybe he had a Mitch McConnell moment. Mitch McConnell has frozen on camera like 3 times, and Trump maybe had a scare with somebody off camera where he just kind of froze up or paused. So maybe somebody convinced him, just give it a couple days and see if the twitching goes away. I don't know, but do I think he's dead? No. I honestly, I think if he actually had a heart attack and died, that information would immediately be released or leaked. Yeah. But if he just has like a huge bruise on his face for some reason, or maybe he's glitching or freezing up or something happened, then yeah. Or maybe he fell down some stairs and broke his elbow or his knee and doesn't want anyone to know yet. Like we're going to find out eventually.
Yeah. Fascinating stuff. Fascinating. Well, look, Jake, is there anything that we haven't talked about that you think is worthy of note in this conversation?
No, we're good, Jonathan. I appreciate you.
Well, look, mate, I really appreciate you, and thank you so much for coming on. Thank you to all the wonderful people in the live chat, the mods who have been keeping an eye on things, making sure we aren't there isn't an influx of trolls and whatnot. It's funny, I did a short. I have a thing where I go and watch. I've got twin boys; they're 15 now. One of them, actually, they both play football again now. One of them I go to is football training on Wednesday night, and I do this summer evening short, YouTube short. So with my phone, I do 3 minutes, and I did one the other day, and it was just on this this video that a Russian made of working at Typhoon military factory, saying, "Please bomb us. I haven't been paid for 2 months." I thought that's fascinating. I thought it revealed quite a lot about the military industrial complex being in trouble. If they're not getting paid, then you've got trouble in Russia. Anyway, for some reason, it had way more views than my normal YouTube shorts, which get about 4 views, right? And my goodness, that I had so many people, so many trolls just attacking me for being propaganda or whatever. Do you have certain videos where, I mean, you must get trolled to the nth degree, right? Like, how do you deal with them? As a last sort of question, is there anything that particularly gets those trolls angry?
No, I don't think about them. I just block them and move on. First, you can never tell if they're a real person or if they're
Yeah,
just a bot farm in St. Petersburg. So any comments that I see or get that is pro-Russian, I just block them and move on. I do this
yeah,
dozens of times a day across all
yeah,
my social media
yeah,
platforms. I block dozens of people a day, and it's really just like, like your garden doing maintenance. You've got
yeah,
to trim and hedge and just it,
yeah,
it is important. Like blocking people matters to the algorithms because if somebody gets blocked by enough people, the algorithm, the platform then knows this is probably an offensive or not a good person. Therefore, their content and comments will not be ranked as high and their stuff won't be pushed in the algorithms. So, like, this is, I think, kind of like an etiquette or a norm that digital users need to adopt. Like, don't boycott platforms, block people, mute people. Make sure that they know that their actions are inappropriate and you blocking them is not going to change them. But you are teaching the algorithms and the platforms that this is not a good user. So I don't think people should be boycotting platforms to get their information out. I think they should just be more aggressive in blocking people so that the algorithms and platforms know these are not trustworthy people. But I don't give them any thought or reflection. I'm not looking to troll them. I don't care if they watch my stuff, but I don't think about them at all. I don't even know if they're real.
yeah. And actually, and by the way, thank you very much to, or not really home as well. Thank you very much to Rob Cook. Really appreciate you, Rob. Thanks, buddy. Yeah, the last thing I'll say about trolls and bots is that these are paid up members almost always of, say, the Russian Federation. And so I have no trouble censoring what I see as an act of warfare. Like, it may be information warfare and it may be comments on a YouTube or Twitter thread, but that is warfare. When Russians are invading my house with their disinformation, I have no problem shutting that down. And if you're a free speech absolutist, I will argue till I am blue in the face that that kind of interference in our information spaces in a foreign country is not worthy of allowing to exist. It is in order to nefariously influence a foreign country. And so screw you, bot, screw you, troll. End of rant. Last words, Jake.
Continue supporting Ukraine. Russia will be defeated.
Slava Ukraini. Thank you, Jake. You are an absolute star. Please stay on the line so we can say our goodbyes properly. Thank you so much to all the wonderful people in the live threads. Thank you to the supporters of the channel. Please remember to support Car for Ukraine. The donation link is below. Thank you, Cheryl, for spreading that on the live chat. Thank you all, one and all, but very much thank you, Jake, for your time. Take care, everybody, and toodle pips.
Cheers.